5-10 minutes is okay, but more than that, if we lose, that means we'll not get much time to cover up the lecture that we intend to cover in one class. So anyway, Prasob, you were asking me that whether there is a effect of moon's gravity on the Earth's atmosphere, right, Prasob? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Prasob?
Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
So could you find the answer? Could you find the answer? Yes or no? Prasob, whether you could
Sir.
find the answer? Yes.
No.
Could you find the answer whether there is a effect of moon's gravity on Earth's atmosphere?
No, sir.
No, no, not yet. Anybody? Can anybody reply Prasob's question that whether moon's gravity will have an impact on Earth's atmosphere? Can anybody reply?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Devasius, can you say what is your answer? Devasius, can you answer the question?
Yes, sir. Because
Yeah.
moon's gravity causes tidal effect. So it
Mm-hmm.
also affects like it affects the sea levels. It also has
Mm-hmm.
negligible, though smaller extent of effect, but it also affects the atmosphere and also the Earth's crust.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. So that's right. I mean, Prasob, did you hear clearly, Prasob?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. The point is, well, just like the Earth gravitational force has a very strong impact on the Earth's atmosphere, so also the moon's gravity has the impact on the Earth's atmosphere. But do you know what is the gravitational force of the moon compared to Earth? Prasov, do you know what is the gravitational force of the moon
Sir,
compared to Earth?
two
Hmm?
point something. 2 point something.
2 point something. Well, that is
Yes.
still 2 point what? What is the unit of that? What is the unit of the gravitational force? What is the unit of the acceleration due to gravity? You're all physics honors students, no? You have studied physics at the BSc level. What is the unit of the Earth's gravitational force? Acceleration due to gravity. What is the unit of
Sir,
that?
meter per second square, sir.
Yes, exactly. Meter per second square, right? And what is the value of that? Earth's gravitational force?
Sir, for Earth, it's
9.8 meter per
9.8
Yes,
in
exactly.
average.
Exactly. Approximately on an average, it is 9.8 meter per second square, right? And what is the moon's gravitational force? Prasov said that it is about 2. Is that
So it
correct?
is 1/6. So it is about 1/6
Yes.
of
Yes.
Earth's
Yeah,
gravitational
exactly.
force.
It is about 1/6 of the Earth's gravity. And so its value is approximately now say 1.6 meter,
1.6.
meter per second square, right? So it's too small compared to the Earth's gravitational force, right? And therefore, the moon's gravitational force, though it will have some impact on the atmosphere, but it will be insignificant, right? It will be insignificant, right? Also, the gravitational force will attract a substance depending upon its mass, right? It will attract a substance depending upon the mass, right? Depends on the mass of this object. That how is the gravitational force, right? You have studied that law of gravitation, right? The, the force of gravitation or force of attraction between two objects is proportional or directly proportional to the mass of the two objects, isn't it? That is the Newton's law of gravitation, right? You have studied about that, isn't it?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, exactly. So the mass of the atmosphere when we see compared to the mass of the ocean, water, right? Ocean also gets affected by the moon's gravity, but the mass of the ocean, water, is much, much larger compared to the mass of the atmosphere, right? So proportionately, you see a visible effect on the ocean tides, right? You have studied about the ocean tides, isn't it? So there are tides in the ocean, and there is a maxima when there is a full moon or new moon or no moon. Then accordingly, there is a maxima of the ocean tides, and that also because on that day, on the full moon day, and also on the new moon day, all three things, Earth, Moon, and the Sun, they're all in the same line, a straight line, right? And so there is a maximum impact of the gravitational force on the Earth's surface, and therefore we get tidal effects on the ocean. Similarly, there is an effect of the gravity on the Earth's atmosphere for other planetary objects like moon or sun or other planets, but that is very, very small. One reason is because the moon's gravitational force is small, and second reason is because the Earth's atmosphere mass is much small compared to the mass of the ocean, right? Also, generally in the atmospheric modeling, when you will study atmospheric modeling later on in the next semester, or also in this semester when you will study the atmospheric dynamics of the atmosphere, you will see that when we try to consider the full form of the hydrodynamic equations, right? You have heard or you have studied that the laws of the atmosphere is governed by the laws of hydrodynamics and the thermodynamics, right? So when we write the mathematical expressions for the laws of hydrodynamics to represent the atmosphere, we find that there are many terms in those equations which are very, very small compared to the remaining terms. And so we do some kind of a so-called scale analysis. We do the so-called scale analysis in which we try to neglect the terms which have magnitude smaller than the other term, or a smaller order of magnitude than the remaining terms, right? When we try to neglect the terms in the hydrodynamic equations, suppose for example Newton's law of motion, when we write the equation of motion for the Earth's atmosphere, the equation of motion will have many terms, and in those terms we try to take into account only the one which has the highest order of magnitude. The one which has lower order of magnitude we try to ignore or neglect, to simplify, basically to simplify, because we know that it will not have much visible impact on the evolution of the atmosphere, right? Can you hear me clearly? Am I audible clearly?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Yes,
exactly.
sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, exactly. So we try to ignore or neglect those terms in the equations of motion, or for that matter, any other equation, whose order of the magnitude is much smaller compared to the rest of the terms of that equation, right? And that is called the scale analysis. What is it called? What is it called?
Scale analysis.
Scale
Scale
analysis.
analysis.
Exactly, scale analysis. You will study about the scale analysis more in detail in the dynamic meteorology course, okay, or atmospheric dynamics. So we try to ignore them or neglect them. One reason, because we know that it will not have much impact on the overall solution of the equation, right? Secondly, we try to ignore also to simplify the equation, because unnecessarily having so many terms in the equation which doesn't have significant impact, there is no point in carrying on, because later on when we try to integrate those equations numerically, then Oh, too many terms, unnecessary terms cause a lot of complications. So we try to ignore those things, right? So that is called the scale analysis. And so is the case of the impact of the moon's gravitational force on the atmospheric uh, processes, atmospheric phenomena. For example, on a cyclone, on a tropical cyclone, or on a thunderstorm, if we talk about, then it will not have much impact. The moon's gravitational force will not have much impact on the cyclone. For example, normally it is observed that the highest impact of the moon's gravitational force on the variation of the surface pressure could be about 0 point something or maybe approximately 1 millibar or so. What is the mean sea level pressure? What is the mean sea level pressure typically?
So 1013.
Yes.
1 atmosphere.
Yeah, 1 atmosphere, that is the unit. And its value is
1000
approximately 1013 millibar.
hectopascal.
Exactly, 1013 millibar. So compared to that 1013 millibar, a variation in pressure of about 0 point something millibar or 1 millibar is insignificant, isn't it? An order of the magnitude of 3. The 1000 is approximately 10 to the power 3, right? And if there is a variation of about hardly 1 millibar or so, then it is almost insignificant, which we can comfortably ignore. When there is a cyclone, in a very intense tropical cyclone, the cyclone is very, very intense or strong. What is the approximate central pressure? Do you have any idea? Approximately the central pressure of a cyclone is how much? Do you know? No idea?
No, sir.
No. Typically, in a tropical cyclone, which is very, very, let's say, strong, super cyclone or no, severe cyclonic storm, the central pressure can go down to about 960 millibar, or sometimes even 950 millibar. You might have heard about the cyclone Philene or Hudhud. Have you heard about the cyclone Hudhud and Philene?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
yeah, exactly. Or the so-called Odisha super cyclone, which hit the coast of Odisha in 1998. They were the super cyclones, right? And in those kind of super cyclones, the central pressure can fall down to about 950, 960 millibar. So if the typical mean sea level pressure is about 1013 millibar, so a fall from 1013 millibar down to about 950 millibar is a tremendous fall, right? How much millibar fall in that case? Approximately 50 plus 10.
63.
Yeah, 50, 60 millibar or 63 millibar to be more exact, right? So compared to the 63 millibar fall in pressure in a super cyclonic storm, this variation of pressure of about 1 millibar or point something millibar because of the Earth's, because of the attraction of by the moon's gravity is almost insignificant, isn't it? Insignificant. And that's why we try to ignore those variations because it doesn't really impact much on the atmospheric systems. When we say atmospheric systems, we mean the typical weather systems, like cyclone or thunderstorms or western disturbances, etc., that we will read more in detail later on. Okay. So clear, Prasob? Is that
Yes,
clear?
sir.
Yeah,
Yes,
that's
sir.
the reason why we did try to ignore the moon's gravitational force, okay, on the Earth's atmosphere, okay. So, having said that, now have you studied about there is a diurnal variation of the surface pressure on the Earth's surface? Have you ever heard about the diurnal variation of the pressure on the surface of the Earth? Yes or
No,
no?
sir.
No. Okay.
No, sir.
Yeah,
Yes,
if you
sir.
plot the surface pressure observation, if you take observation of the surface pressure round the clock
Yes,
every
sir.
1 hourly, yeah, you know, Devasis, you might have studied. If you take the observation of the surface pressure every 1 hourly round the clock and plot on a graph, you will find that there are two maxima and two minima in the surface pressure. You'll find that there are two maxima and two minima in the surface pressure. Okay, and it looks like something like this one. Is this graph visible to you?
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
yeah,
Yes, sir.
exactly.
Yes, sir.
So
Yes, sir.
this is how the variation of the surface pressure looks like in 24 hours. Okay, the variation of the surface in 24 hours looks like this one. And you can see that there are two maxima in the surface pressure and two minima in the surface pressure in 24 hours. Okay, and this is called the diurnal variation. And you will notice that the surface pressure is maximum at 10 o'clock in the morning. This is 10 o'clock in the morning. And this is 10 o'clock in the night, right? 10 o'clock in the morning and 10 o'clock in the night. And it is minimum at 4 o'clock in the morning and 4 o'clock in the afternoon. That means at every 6 hour interval, there is a change from minimum to maximum, from maximum to minimum, from minimum to maximum. Every 6 hour interval, the surface pressure on the Earth's surface varies like this. And this diurnal variation also, its amplitude is not much. If you look at the amplitude of this diurnal variation, this is a natural variation. And its amplitude will depend upon place to place. Okay. Its amplitude of this diurnal variation will depend from place to place, like it is maximum at the equator and minimum at the pole. Sometimes at the polar regions, you may not find two distinct maxima and two distinct minima. You may find just one maxima, one minima. A semi-diurnal, you can say. Right? And this amplitude is about only approximately 1.7 millibar at the equator. In the equatorial region, this maxima is about 1.7 millibar. Right? So that means even though every day there is a variation of the surface pressure, but this diurnal variation is not much compared to the variation or the fall in pressure when there is a passage of a tropical cyclone, right? The drop in pressure when a cyclone passes is, just now we discussed, could be about 50 to 60 millibar, depending upon how intense is the cyclone. It can be just 5-10 millibar also if the cyclone is not very strong, maybe in a depression or in a just a cyclonic storm, not a severe cyclonic storm. It can be just 5 to 10 millibar, but in a very, very intense cyclone, the super cyclone, it can be 50 to 60 millibar. And that pressure difference causes the pressure gradient force, right? Pressure gradient force. And that pressure gradient force causes the strong winds, right? Strong winds. You might have heard the winds could be about as much as 250, 300 kilometer per hour, right? 250 to 300 kilometer per hour in a very severe cyclonic storm. When a cyclone passes, that could be the wind speed. But when the eye of the storm comes over you, then you will find just clear weather, no wind, right? Because you are in the center of the cyclone. And as soon as again the eye passes, you will start encountering strong winds and lots of clouds and lots of rainfall, etc. Right? But the pressure at the center can be as much as, depending upon what is the intensity of the cyclone. So we're trying to emphasize that this diurnal variation, although it is a regular feature, occurs, but the amplitude of the pressure is much smaller. compared to the typical weather systems when it passes over us. Okay. So this is about the diurnal variation of the pressure. Okay. Now, last time we were discussing about the hydrostatic cohesion, right? Hydrostatic balance, that we have already discussed. We also discussed about the geopotential. In the last lecture, on the last Friday, we were talking about the geopotential. Do you remember? Can somebody say what is geopotential? Can somebody explain what is geopotential? We discussed about that last Friday.
The work,
Yes.
so the work done to move a unit mass of substance from a particular point to the other, opposite to the Earth gravitational force in the atmosphere.
Yeah, the work done in bringing a sample of air, for example, air mass, from Earth's surface to any point is the geopotential, right? And we were discussing last class that on the Earth surface, as you go up, the pressure decreases and you can have isobaric surfaces, imaginary surfaces of pressure which are equal everywhere, right? Isobaric surfaces, right? And we measure the height of the isobaric surfaces in terms of the so-called geopotential, right? We discussed about the geopotential, and we also discussed about how to compute the geopotential in the last class. Okay, we discussed about that in the last class, and we discussed that the geopotential at any height z can be obtained by integrating the hydrostatic equation from 0 to z, that point in the atmosphere. Okay, these things we have discussed in the last class already. Okay, and so we had discussed that the thickness, okay, the thickness between two isobaric surfaces whose pressures are P1 and P2 can be obtained from this expression Z2 minus Z1, where Z is the geopotential height of the isobaric surfaces, which can be obtained by RD is the gas constant for the dry air, G0 is the mean acceleration due to gravity, and P1 and P2 are the pressure, okay, of the isobaric surfaces. Tb is the virtual temperature, right? dP divided by P. We have discussed about all these things earlier. Tb is the virtual temperature, okay, RD is the gas constant, and so on. So this is called the geopotential thickness, okay, geopotential thickness, and I got lots of implications. We shall discuss about that shortly, okay. But before that, we once again try to recall the scale height, okay. That also we had discussed earlier in previous classes, scale height, okay. Now, who can define, who remembers the scale height? Does somebody remember scale height?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, can you
So
define scale?
the scale height is the height at
Yes.
which the pressure drops it to about 35% of the surface.
Exactly, that's right.
I'm
35%
not sure
of
if
the,
it's pressure or density.
yeah, pressure and density decreases to about 35% of its value at the Earth's surface, right? And that is the scale height. And what is the typical values of the scale height of the Earth's atmosphere? Normal value? Do you remember?
So, no,
What
sir.
is the,
I think 5 to 10 kilometers.
no, it's about 7 to
7
8
to 8.
kilometer. Yeah, about 7 to 8 kilometers. That is the scale height, typical scale height of the Earth's atmosphere. Okay, and we had discussed about this in one of the classes earlier. We shall just try to review it once again today. Okay, now for an isothermal atmosphere, you know what is meant by isothermal? Isothermal.
Same temperature.
A constant
Yes, sir.
Same
temperature.
temperature, exactly at constant temperature. Isotherm. No, the line of equal temperature, that is called the isotherm. Just like the line of equal pressure is called the isobar, right?
Bars.
The line of equal pressure is called the isobar. Similarly, the line of equal temperature is called the isotherm. So a surface where the temperature is same everywhere is the isothermal atmosphere. So in an isothermal atmosphere, okay, where the temperature is same everywhere, some imaginary surface, if the virtual temperature correction is neglected. Now we discussed about the virtual temperature earlier, right? Do you remember the virtual temperature? Virtual temperature?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, can you define virtual temperature?
So the temperature of the dry air to which the density of the dry air and moisture become the same.
Yeah, approximately, yeah. That is the definition, that the temperature of the dry air which must be raised in order to have the same density as that of the moist air, right? And so there is a correction to be applied. The virtual temperature is always higher than the ambient temperature or the normal temperature. Virtual temperature is always higher than the normal temperature. And we had discussed about that in the previous classes, the expression of how to calculate the virtual temperature that we had discussed last time in the last class. Okay. So if the virtual temperature correction is neglected, then this equation 2, because this is the virtual temperature, right? In this equation of the thickness, geopotential thickness, Tb is the virtual temperature. So if we ignore the variation of the virtual temperature, we can treat this as a constant and then take it out of this integral, right? Take it out of this integral. And this equation becomes Z2 minus Z1 is equal to H times log of P1 divided by P2, right? Where H is the scale height here. H is the scale height here. And this scale height is, from this one you can see this is equal to RT divided by G0, where G0 is the mean acceleration due to gravity, and which is approximately equal to 29.3 times T. Okay, this is the scale height. So it will depend upon the temperature. Okay, let's say this is equation number 3. And so from this expression, we can calculate the pressure at any level in the atmosphere, given the pressure at a reference level. Given the pressure P1, let us say P1 is the reference level, you can calculate the P2 is equal to P1 times e to the power minus Z2 minus Z1 divided by H. Okay, so from this expression you can calculate the thickness of the isobaric surfaces, and from this you can calculate the pressure. Okay, because the atmosphere is well mixed below the turbopause. You know what is turbopause? Turbopause is approximately 105 kilometers. Okay, almost you can think this is the top of the atmosphere, 105 kilometers, or the top of the exosphere, right? Above the thermosphere, exosphere. You remember that? We discussed it in the initial classes. The pressures and densities of the individual gases decreases with altitude at the same rate. Okay, above that. So the scale height is proportional to the gas constant R. You can see from this expression, the scale height is proportional to the gas constant R. So if we take a value of virtual temperature Tb about 255 Kelvin, which is the approximate mean value for the troposphere and the stratosphere, because we assumed that we neglect the variation of Tb, okay, in the vertical. So we take approximate value of Tb equal to 255 Kelvin as mean of the troposphere and the stratosphere. Then the scale height H for air in the atmosphere is found to be about, from this equation, about 7.5 kilometers. That's what we mentioned earlier. The scale height is about 7 to 8 kilometers. of the Earth's atmosphere. Okay, that is the scale height. And as we said earlier, the scale height is the height where the density and pressure drops by about 35% of its surface value. Okay. So now let's talk about the hypsometric equation. Hypsometric equation. Have you heard about this hypsometric equation? Yes or no?
No, sir. No.
Okay. Have you
No,
heard
sir.
about the
No, sir.
hypsometer? Have you heard about the
Sir.
hypsometer?
Sir.
No? Okay.
No, sir.
Yeah, hypsometer is a simple instrument. Generally, it can be handheld instrument also, or it can be fixed in a wall also, which is used to calculate basically the humidity. Hypsometer. Okay. And we discuss now the hypsometric equation. The temperature of the atmosphere generally varies with height. Okay. And the virtual temperature correction cannot always be neglected. We just, in the previous slide, we shared that we assume that the virtual temperature is negligible in the atmosphere, the troposphere and the stratosphere, and we took its value to be about 255 Kelvin. But actually, in the reality, it is not so. You cannot ignore the variation of the virtual temperature because of the presence of the moisture. And the moisture varies from place to place, from level to level. Okay. So the virtual temperature correction cannot be neglected. Okay. In this case, the last equation 2 may be integrated if we define a mean virtual temperature with respect to P. Okay, mean virtual temperature, let's say TB, and TB is equal to the ratio of P2 to P1 integration TB d log P divided by again integration P2 to P1 d log P, which comes from the previous equation. If you just notice look at the previous slide, you will immediately know that the virtual temperature can be now obtained by this expression, which is equal to integration from P2 to P1 TB dP by P log divided by log of P1 by P2. But mind you, I mean, this is the mean virtual temperature. Okay, this is the mean virtual temperature, Whereas if we relate the virtual temperature with the ambient temperature, if you recall, now the previous lecture, you will see that the virtual temperature is related to the ambient temperature by a factor of TB is equal to T times 1 plus 0.062 omega, where omega is the mixing ratio. You just see the previous slides and you will find that virtual temperature, the relation between the virtual temperature and the ambient temperature. Okay. So let's say this is equation number 4. Then from previous equation 2 and 4, we can get Z2 minus Z1, the thickness, as equal to, earlier we have seen, equal to h bar, the mean of the scale height, log of P1 by P2, and which is equal to RD times TB by G naught, log of P1 by 2. This equation is called the hypsometric equation. This equation is called the hypsometric equation. And you can see that from this equation, basically you can get or calculate the thickness, show the thickness between two isobaric surfaces having pressure P1 and P2 can be obtained by this expression, RD times mean of TB divided by G0 log of P1 by P2, where TB bar or mean TB virtual temperature is given by this expression. Earlier we assumed that it is, let us assume that it is 255 Kelvin as a mean virtual temperature between troposphere and stratosphere. But that is not accurate. That is just approximate value. I mean, we just assumed that. But if in reality, if you want to really calculate the mean temperature, mean virtual temperature, then you have to calculate it from this expression. The mean virtual temperature you have to calculate from this expression to be more exact. Okay. And you substitute this mean virtual temperature here. Then you get the thickness of isobaric surface. Okay, and this equation is called the hypsometric equation. Okay, hypsometric equation. You will have to study your books also. Okay, the textbooks which are prescribed, which you have already downloaded. You have to study the textbook, then it will be more clear. In the PowerPoint, we will not be able to derive like in a classroom. The blackboard, as we derive in the blackboard, that is not practical here, visible here on the PowerPoints. But you can do it yourself. You can just read it yourself on the books, and also the PowerPoint, which I will give you later after completion of this part of the syllabus. I'll give you the PowerPoint. You can read the PowerPoint also. Okay. So this is the hypsometric equation. Now let's discuss a little bit about the thickness and heights of constant pressure surface. What are its implications? Okay. What are the implications of the thickness? How do we interpret if the thickness between two isobaric surfaces is high? What does it imply? Or if the thickness between two isobaric surfaces is low, what does it imply? Okay, you can interpret very easily by measuring the thickness between two isobaric surfaces, the kind of weather or the atmosphere that you are going to have in the near future. Okay, generally, last time we had discussed that how we measure the height of the isobaric surfaces, or how we measure the geopotential height of the isobaric surfaces. What is the instrument we use? Can somebody say? We have discussed it earlier. In the previous classes, we had discussed that every day we measure the height of the isobaric surfaces in the atmosphere.
So radiosonde.
Yes, exactly. Radiosonde. Every day we measure the profile of the atmosphere, the temperature profile, the moisture profile, the wind profile in the atmosphere using an instrument called radiosonde. We have discussed about that. Okay, we tie electronic equipment in a balloon filled with hydrogen and just lift it, and as it rises, it measures the profile of temperature and humidity and wind, okay, at different levels in the atmosphere in the vertical, and transmits the data at the ground receiving station, right? And this is done every day, at least once, if not twice. We have discussed about that. And we have discussed that in India we have how many radiosonde stations? Can somebody remember? How many radiosonde stations we have in India?
So, I guess 40.
Yeah, yes, exactly. About 39, 40 stations are there. And generally, we take the observation twice a day. Once in the morning, at what time? Can you remember at what time in the morning? We take the radiosonde observation twice a day, once in the morning
So
and once in
5:30.
the evening. Can somebody say what? Yeah,
So
5:30 in the
5:30.
morning and 5:30 in the evening. Right, 5:30 in the morning and 5:30 in the evening. That is the 00 UTC and 12 UTC. Okay, these are the two times we take the observation of the vertical profile of the atmosphere. And sometimes we take only once also, because as I said earlier, these radiosondes are quite a costly equipment, and once it is launched, now we just lose that instrument, because somewhere it will fall down after the balloon is burst. So from the radiosonde measurement, and also nowadays we can get these things also from the satellite measurements also. Okay, we can measure the height of different isobaric surfaces in the vertical. Okay, at what height the isobaric surface, let us say 100 millibar, is existing, or at what height the isobaric surface like 500 millibar is existing, at what height the isobaric surface of 850 millibar is existing. And that variation of the height of the isobaric surface tells us about the kind of weather pattern or atmospheric systems which are present at different locations, different places around the Earth surface. Okay, so from the simple laws of physics, from the fundamental laws of physics, just think if the thickness of the isobaric surface is high, what does it imply? Will it imply a low temperature or will it imply a high temperature? From the simple principle of the physics, if the thickness between two isobaric surfaces are high, will it imply a warmer temperature or a colder temperature? Tell me. Can somebody say?
Sir, warmer temperature.
Yes, exactly. It will imply a warmer temperature, right? When the thickness between two isobaric surfaces is high, it will imply a warmer temperature. Okay. When the thickness between two isobaric surfaces is less, it will imply a cooler temperature. Okay. So, I mean, there are a lot of interrelationships between all these things. You can interpret the evolution of the atmosphere by measuring these thicknesses. And you can say that where there will be high pressure, where there will be low pressure, where there will be high temperature, where there will be cold temperature. Right? You can easily interpret that from the measurement of the geopotential of the isobaric surfaces and thereby thicknesses of the isobaric surfaces. So when there is a high temperature, when the temperature is high, what will happen? Will the pressure fall down or the pressure will rise? When the temperature is high, strong heating by the solar radiation of the Earth's surface will cause increase in the pressure or decrease in the pressure of the surface. Tell me.
So increase in the pressure.
Increase in the pressure. Who is that? Who said that? I'm not able to see you.
Sir, Deepak.
Deepak said that the strong heating of the Earth's surface by solar radiation will cause the increase of the surface pressure. But that is wrong. Okay, that is just reverse, opposite. Because when the temperature increases, then the air at the surface will also increase. Temperature of the air at the surface will also increase. Air will become warm, right? Because of the strong heating of the ground, the air will become warm. And as it becomes warm, it will start rising up. Warm air will rise up. Isn't it, Deepak? Warm air will
Yes,
rise
sir.
up, right? So when the air is
Yes, sir.
rising up, then the pressure will fall down there at the surface. And so the pressure from the surrounding point, surrounding area will rush to fill up that gap because the mass continuity equation or the conservation of mass has to be ensured or valid, right? The law of conservation of mass, law of conservation of moisture, law of conservation of kinetic energy, right? These are the conservation law, principle of law of conservations. And that's why we get the monsoon. For example, during the monsoon season, monsoon is a very interesting thing. It occurs every year, isn't it? The monsoon occurs every year. We call generally from 1st June to 30th September is the monsoon season, isn't it? Monsoon season. It occurs every year. Everybody knows that. But even then, not every monsoon is the same. Although we all know that monsoon will occur every year. And all that is because of the variation of the solar radiation at the Earth's surface because of the movement of the Sun-Earth position, summer solstice, winter solstice, all those things you must have studied in your geography book in your school days, right? So in the summer season, we have got the summer solstice, and the Earth gets heated maximum by the solar radiation, and so we have got low pressure area at the ground, and you must have heard about the equatorial trough and doldrums, things like that, right? So during the summer season, because of the strong heating of the temperature, low pressure area develops over the land. Okay, and as the sun's position changes or moves with respect to Earth, so the low pressure area also moves, right? And so it migrates from 1st June to 30th of September. Generally, the onset of the monsoon occurs over India, I mean the extreme southern point of our India, say coast of Kerala. Typically, do you know, have you studied what is the normal date of the onset of the monsoon over the coast of Kerala? Yes or no?
No, sir.
No? Okay. Typically, the onset of the monsoon on an average over the coast of Kerala is considered to be 1st of June every year. 1st of June. Okay, monsoon onsets and then slowly it will migrate northward and cover all parts of the India, whole part of country. And so by the time the monsoon reaches the northern part or the northwestern part, extreme northwest part of the country, it is almost like middle of the rather July or first week of the July. It will cover the entire country, including Rajasthan. I mean, the western most state of India, Rajasthan, Gujarat, or Punjab. No, it will cover by the middle of the July or first week of July generally. In the onset of the monsoon, typically in Delhi is about 29th of June. The normal date of onset of the monsoon in Delhi is about 29th of June, whereas on Kerala it is 1st of June. So it takes almost 29 days for the monsoon to reach from Kerala to Delhi. And further north and west, it takes another 1 week or so. So by first week of July, it will cover the whole country. And after that, as the sun and earth position keep changing, moving, again the monsoon trough will start retreating or withdrawing. Okay. And by the end of this September, 30th of September, they are all the average dates. Okay. By the end of the September, the monsoon is supposed to have withdrawn from the entire country. And that is the southwest monsoon, by the way. That is the southwest monsoon. And generally, as soon as the southwest monsoon withdraws by the end of the September, then in the first week of October or so, then we start getting the northeast monsoon. And especially the southern peninsular India, typically the east coast of India, Tamil Nadu, okay, they get more rainfall by the northeastern monsoon than compared to the southwestern monsoon. Okay, so now this is the month of November, or now today is 1st of December. By this time, the northeast monsoon is supposed to be active in the eastern coast of India, especially the southeastern coast of India. And this time again, we get a lot of tropical cyclones. Now another one is coming up. Last week there was one tropical cyclone. You might have heard about that. And another one is coming up in the way. It's almost close to Sri Lanka. Today, I think it is a form of depression or deep depression. It might hit Sri Lanka and then cross the coast of Sri Lanka and then emerge into the again that bay near the southern tip, near the Rameswaram or somewhere. So, I mean, this is a seasonal cycle. Everybody knows that from the geography We all know that seasonal cycle. But at the same time, the monsoon in 2 different years are not the same. So many, again, physics and dynamics involved in that. To be able to predict the monsoon accurately is a big challenge. And we use a lot of complex model, complicated model to be able to predict the monsoon each year, that whether monsoon will be normal or not normal, below normal, above normal, how much rainfall will occur at which place, etc. It's a big challenge. Okay, we shall study those things later on in some other subjects. Okay, so today we are going to stop the class. We started late, about 15-20 minutes, and so we are ending also late by what, 10-15 minutes. Okay, is that clear?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Do you have any question? Any question to ask? Any points to discuss? If no, then we
No,
shall
sir.
stop today.
No, sir.
Okay, then we shall stop for today, and then we shall meet on the next class, that is on Wednesday. Okay, day after tomorrow. No, tomorrow is Wednesday. Tomorrow we have a break, and then Thursday we will meet again for the next class. Okay, so I'm going to stop recording of this class. Stop recording.